Hello chess lovers, I have a very interesting game for you played by Petar, Arnaudov and Moser. This is a game played in 2013 in Augsburg. Arnaudov started with d4 and f5 by Moser, Dutch defense, bishop g5, white goes for hop-on attack. This bishop g5 move acts against e6, and at some point if knight f6 then black is intending to capture f6, doubling white's pawns, but black played h6. Of course there is nothing wrong with knight f6 as well, but we see h6, bishop h4, g5 and e3. Actually e4 leads to sharper variations, but this time we see e3. Knight f6, of course not g takes h4 because black can even get checkmated. After e3 we see knight f6, black is covering the h5 square, bishop g3, d6, h4, challenging black's kingside pawns, g4, bishop d3, knight c6, knight e2, both players are developing their pieces, e5, black is grabbing more space, bishop b5, already the knight is pinned and there is too much pressure on e5 square, that's why black plays queen e7, c4, bishop d7, knight c3, bishop g7, d5, knight d8, we see the exchange of light square bishops, queen c2 and castling kingside. Actually placing the knight on f7 and castling queenside is also playable, but after queen c2 black decided to castle kingside. A bit risky decision, but okay, no problem for black. e4, well actually f3 could make for black more problems. If knight f7 then castling queenside and then try to undermine black's pawns on the kingside, but after castling kingside we see e4, f4, black wants to keep the kingside closed, bishop h2, knight h5, white castles queenside, knight f7, f3, g3, closing the kingside and kicking away the bishop, bishop g1, but now of course the bishop on this diagonal feels pretty comfortable, queen e7, black will now start targeting this pawn on h4 square, king b1, bishop f6, knight c1, knight h8, black wants to capture the pawn on h4 with a knight and then put pressure on g2 square. b4, white is starting an advancement on the queen side, preparing c5, knight g6. Well, in typical King's Indian defense type positions, black is usually playing a5. For example, a5 is better. If b takes a5, then rook takes a5, trying to break apart white's pawn chain. But after b4 we see knight g6, c5, and the knight captures the pawn on h4 square, knight b3, b6, rook c1, knight g7, knight b5, h5, a4, queen d7, queen e2, rook c8, a5. White is playing very ambitiously and now this can become very dangerous for white. The king on b1 square can become an easy target for black pieces. We see b takes c5, b takes c5 and a6. Well, instead of playing a6, rook b8 was giving black a huge advantage. Now if c6, then queen c8 with the idea of bringing the queen on a6 square, and this is going to be terrible for white. But after b takes c5 we see a6, c6, first kicking away the queen and then knight a7. Well, by playing knight a7, black is cutting the rook's path and is targeting the pawn on a6, but on the other hand the knight on a7 looks misplaced. Placing back the knight on c3 square would have been better, but we see knight a7, rook b8, king a2 protecting the knight, rook b4, rook takes h4. A dubious decision by white which gives black advantage, though on the other hand this looks reasonable. The knight on h4 square was attacking the pawn on g2, and as this queen is protecting all the time the pawn, white wants to free his queen, that's why decided to go for this exchange sacrifice. Bishop takes h4, rook c4, rook b8, rook a4, bishop f6, and finally white captures the pawn on a6. In return, black is playing h4, trying to get a passed pawn on the king side. Queen b7. White is also trying to use the power of his pawns, but in this position accepting the queen sacrifice and capturing on b7 can be very dangerous. Now if rook b8, then knight c6 can be very unpleasant, and if queen e8, then again knight c6, and then this pawn is coming, the rook is hanging. This is going to be terrible for black. That's why after queen b7 we see queen f7, a6, h3, g takes h3, queen h5 coming after this pawn on f3, knight b5, knight e8, knight takes c7, knight takes c7, queen takes c7, and queen takes f3. Now that knight on b3 square is hanging, bishop b6 blocking the rook's path, but we first see queen g2 check, king a3, queen takes h3, a7, rook e8, queen b7, and now the f-pawn marches forward, bishop c7, f2, bishop b8. With this beautiful bishop maneuver, white trapped the rook on a8, but of course looks like that white is too late. Black is already promoting the first pawn to a queen. Queen takes a8, g2, the second pawn is marching forward, and there it goes, black is promoting the second pawn to a queen. a8 queen. Now if we have a look at the position, we have 5 queens on the board. This is a very unique game, but of course with an extra queen this is going to be winning for black. Queen c5 check, queen b4. Well, if king a2, again, white king is getting checkmated after several moves. This is a very impressive checkmate, but after queen c5 check, we see queen b4, which allowed checkmate in one. Again, white king is checkmated. A bit long, but a very interesting game, I think. Thanks for watching, and for more games, just hit the subscribe button. Good luck.